Carving 101 today is from Base Camp at Dust Devil Mining Company, the famed Dust Devil Mining Company outside of Plush, Oregon. This one is a nice clean stone, doesn't have any internal fractures, and I've already got a nice flat surface for the window to look into the stone. The back side of it is a little bit domed. It's got a few fractures and inclusions that we can smooth off, and to do the reverse intaglio I like a little bit of a dome on the back. So it was a really good preform to start with. And just do a little bit of sanding across the top and polish it for a window. Look down into the piece. And then we'll round off the outside and give it some kind of shape, probably a little bit of a pear shape. What I like to do is save as much of the shape of the crystal as we can. So it's going to be a little bit of a free-form pear, but I like graceful lines, so we'll try to give it a little bit of interest. And then I'll round the back off with a little bit of a dome, and then we can do some reverse intaglio carving on the back side. I always like roughing it out with this coarse grit. With sunstone, you really don't have to worry too much about chipping. Just speeds the process up a little bit. And all you're doing with this coarse grit, which is about a 220 grit, is you're just shaping everything. You're going to have to get back and do a little bit more fine tuning. You want to make sure there's no little pits. So we got the outside shape and the front of it shaped. Now I'm going to kind of half dome the back side of it. I'm looking to see the little fractures. I'm trying to cut all of the fractures off from the natural crystal. I've got one little tiny area here that I need to do a little bit more. So I've almost got the nice little rounded curve. The sides are all fracture free, and the table doesn't have any fractures on it, which we had a nice flat to begin with. But just touch up this one little spot, and then we can move over to the next grit wheel for a little bit finer sanding. Okay, now that you got rid of all of that, you still see a few little kind of faceted lines from a coarse grit wheel. So we're going to move over and do a little bit finer sanding, or a little finer grinding with a 600 grit wheel. And what I tell people is don't stay in one spot on the wheel, because you end up wearing a groove. You go from all the different areas of the wheel. Sometimes a well-worn wheel, you can actually get better cutting action on the outsides, because everybody has a tendency to stay on the middle of it. When you do an outside perimeter of a stone, you want to just try to have a nice rolling action. Just the fingers primarily, to minimize the little flat spots. Okay, what I've done is just smoothed it up a little bit with a finer grit. This is a 600 grit wheel that's diamond plated, so it's still a pretty aggressive wheel. This next wheel is should be a 600 grit, but it's a resin bonded wheel. It has a little bit of foam backing on it to give you some resilience. And that's where, when you see the little kind of flat faceted lines, from doing a cab. This is where you're going to start rounding those lines off into a nice smooth cab. And don't hesitate to, bear down into the wheel a little bit, because you're pushing in that rubber and you get a nice curvature to the sanding surface that goes across the top. And what gives you a nice even round surface is keep turning the thing, rolling a lot of different directions. Each individual will work out a special little wrist action that works better for them, but you just want to make sure you're moving around a lot of different directions. And again, you do all of the same surfaces you do around the outside. A nice little pendant piece. This is when you need to start thinking about somebody that's going to set the stone. So right now what I have is a sharp ridge across the top surface, and with a 600 grit wheel I'm just going to barely knock that ridge off after I flat the top of it again. That'll provide an area for you to hook it with a prong. So now I'm just going to put a little 45-degree bevel in. It doesn't take much to go all the way around the stone. This is probably one of the most important stages. When you're on a 600 grit wheel, you want to make sure every single grind line from the two previous wheels has disappeared, because you're not going to be able to polish through those. So you want to give it a good careful inspection. If there's any areas, I've got one little area here that's still a little bit faceted, so I'll just touch it up a little bit. We're going to take it from 600 to 1200, and 1200 is actually a good pre-polish. This 1200 and 3000 grit makes a nice pre-polish. You'll actually see the stone looking really shiny, but from that you can go directly to a polish and it'll bring up a really high shine. Probably see from a 600 grit it still has kind of a frosted look about it. But after we get done with the 1200 grit, it'll start to look shinier. You just want to make sure you cover all the same surfaces. You can't stay in one spot too long or you'll end up starting to sand little flat spots. So you want to make sure you develop a good rolling action. The easiest way is to put it on a dop stick where you can hang on to it, but a little bit of experience, you can get pretty good at hanging on to it. You just don't want to get your fingers in the wheel too often, because it will actually sand your skin off, and next thing you know you're bleeding a little bit, and that's not a good thing. Now the rule here is you cut a little bit and you look a lot. What you're looking for is any tiny little areas that you haven't sanded to completion before you move over to the next wheel. If you've got any issues at all, you've got to get rid of them now. That's same principle applies for faceting as well as cabbing. You certainly can't beat the hospitality and camaraderie that happens within the Dust Devil community.